Early birds always rise to the occasion for summer vacation planning because early gets you closer to the action. So don't be late. Book your next vacation early on Vrbo and save over $120. Rise and shine. Average savings $141. Select homes only.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Dialekt.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable.
This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
A conversation with one of my students recently, and his name is Keith, and his wife is now a full-time listener of the show. I wanted to say, I can't remember what her name is, but her nickname is Mego. So Mego, if you're listening, thank you for listening.
Yay.
And she said that her favorite episodes were Da Vinci Part 3, Alexander Dumas Part 3, and she loved the whole Mark Twain series. She absolutely loved your Mark Twain series. So
yay.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it's funny.
Those guys are great.
I feel like I keep going back to anytime somebody talks to me about, the show and says like, well, I want to check it out. Where should I start? I feel like, me being egotistical partly, but it was also because I'm just so proud of it. And I loved the Mark Twain series so much that that's usually my recommendation is like, hey, Mark Twain is my favorite. Like, it's going to take me a long time to get over Mark Twain. So
yeah, man,
start wherever you want to, grab somebody who you think is interesting, but like my favorite was Mark Twain, and there we go. But yay.
That's my favorite of your series as well. Like,
yeah,
if I typically will, because I try not to be like, well, my series are the best, even though, of course we both secretly think that about ourselves.
I mean,
right?
Obviously.
If I'm not telling them to do Da Vinci, I'm telling them to do Mark Twain for sure, because it's so good.
I feel like, I try not to say like, oh, you got to listen to this one, you got to listen to that one, but because I think all of them have something very unique, and it depends on what interests you. Like I've said to people to listen to the Tesla series because it's fascinating and it'll change the way you see all of your electronics in your home. You know what I mean? Which is awesome. But then I've also recommended things like Pancho Villa, which I'm continuously shocked, by the way, the amount of people that have no idea who Pancho Villa was.
Yeah.
But
maybe they even know him as just a name, but not as a human being who's done stuff,
Right. But anyhow, hey everybody, welcome to the Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, hanging out with Akiva Miola.
What's up, y'all?
And we are about to get going on to Frida Kahlo Part 3. We were just talking about some sort of cool things that are happening in the background. Just before we hit record here, we just got into, or at least we're able to apply for the Spotify Partner Program, which is pretty cool. We'll kind of see what happens with that. But we were really just talking about, big thanks to Max Miller, who I'm sure a lot of y'all already know who are listening to the show right now. You probably got brought here because of the Tasting History episode that we did kind of in partnership with Max. So we've seen a lot of y'all come in and are listening to the show now, which we're very grateful for. And actually, before I go even any further than that, wanted to give a quick shout out to Megan Long. Megan is one of our newest Patreon subscribers. So just want to say thanks really quick. I'm not sure if you came over from Max or not, but if you did, welcome. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Yes, thank you, Megan. I appreciate you.
All right. Well, I think quite transparently, everybody, I have a bit of a cold today. I'm actually getting over a cold. So if my voice sounds strange or anything like that, that is why. But also Akiva has a class that he needs to go and teach a little bit later today. So we're
going to try to bust this one out and go through a decade of someone's life. So
we're not going to rush through it, but we are on a time limit. So that's why there's probably not nearly as much sort of us being stupid and talking about nonsense for 10 minutes. Which we try to keep down anyways.
Sorry, people who leave mean comments. You can't do it today.
He did call me jovial, though, which
I thought that was I laughed my ass off about that.
He's a sweet asshole.
That was. I don't want to give him a shout out because I don't want him to leave another comment, but that really did crack me up.
But I think it is I started to realize this too, though, of like, man, it's like if we continue to escalate the way that things have been going, it's like this is just going to happen more and more, and you kind of got to take it in stride.
Oh, especially when we start to add video.
Ooh. I know. Anyways, whatever. It's one of those where I'm sure this person wasn't trying to be like a total jerk. They're probably just like, ha ha ha, I'm just making a silly observation comment. Yeah. Probably didn't think about it. It's not a big deal. But anyhow, we're going to get going into Frida Kahlo Part 3 in just a second. Before we do, like always, if y'all are enjoying the show and you want to be as cool as Megan, you can support us on Patreon. That's going to be patreon.com/thebiographers. And we've also been seeing a pretty nice little tick in different reviews coming in from Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that good stuff as well. So if you're feeling generous and you're liking the show and you want to give us a nice little 5-star review somewhere, we would appreciate that as well. And you can do that pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. And I should also say too, as a just fair warning, we are genuinely this time gearing up for video content. We've sort of heard from y'all, and it sounds like you just want to watch us talk at a camera. So, hey, we'll give it to you. So that we do have in the works. I think we're going to start doing video at the very first episode of our next series. Maybe even our office hours episode for between Frida and our next series.
Oh, that'd be fun.
So just a sort of a soft launch and work out some kinks. But with that, let's get going into Frida Kahlo Part 3.
All right. So in the last episode of Frida Kahlo, we discussed a part of her life that was mainly spent in recovery. After a bus crash in Coyoacan, Frida suffered gruesome injuries across her legs, spine, hips, as well as a pierced uterus from a steel handrail that had broken in the accident. The following year was spent in a slow, painful recovery, piecing her body together. During that time, Frida would also experience another pain. Her novio, boyfriend, Alejandro Gomez Arias, would slowly fade from her life as she was forced to stay still in the bed, wearing a plaster corset to keep her spine intact. Her sisters, Matita and Cristina, would spend time with her, and as a way to pass the time, she began to paint. Along with still lifes and paintings of her sisters and friends, Frida creates her first self-portrait, originally painted as an appeal to Alejandro before he left. Her recovery was awkward, with multiple relapses and nights spent drugged out of her mind, but when she was finally able to live a normal life, she found herself protesting authoritarianism in Mexico through José Vasconcelos's campaign, which hoped to bring forth the era of La Raza Cósmica. While the campaign was a failure, Frida would become acquainted with the Mexican Communist Party as a result, where she would meet none other than Diego Rivera, the world-class muralist. Diego, already in his 40s, had a reputation that preceded him. He was a leader of the Communist Party, the cutting edge of Mexicanidad movements, and a prolific womanizer despite his looks. Frida, nonetheless, fell in love with the older man, having a proletariat-style wedding where her mother likened the experience to, quote, an elephant marrying a dove.
Hey, that's kind of how I feel, how I married my wife. She's beautiful, and I'm a bit of an elephant, so.
You're hardly an elephant, maybe an otter, you know? Their reception was an interesting one. Lupe Marin, Diego's ex-wife and baby mother, even pulled up Frida's skirt to make fun of her patas de palo, or her peg legs. Everyone had an opinion on the marriage, but whether they liked it or not, the two were life partners and comrades. Speaking of comrades, the following days after their marriage were a bit different than the average couples. While they did spend their first days settling into a new home, a gigantic Spanish-style house on Paseo de la Reforma Drive, they would do so with a half dozen other communists as a sort of co-op space for artists. That sounds like a nightmare as a newlywed, just by the way.
living in an artist co-op.
Yeah, looking into a communist artist co-op right as you get married.
But I don't know. I feel like as if you were an artist, that'd be radical. And I feel like for all normal people, that would be a nightmare. You know what I mean?
I like my space, you know?
No, I do too, but, well, I don't know. This is funny to say because you are in your 20s. When I was in my 20s, it was like, I don't care. I can live in a house with 7 dudes. Like, it's not a problem. So I don't know.
No, that ain't me. I have my brother-in-law is my roommate, but he is like a ghost, and he's the best roommate on the planet. He literally scares me when I see him in the kitchen because he just likes to stay in his room and play video games. So. Now, the couple would decorate the home with pre-Columbian art to signify that a new kind of Mexican was living on the block, undermining the Eurocentric aesthetics. But the Bohemian dream died almost as soon as it began. If you remember from the last episode, Diego was the general secretary of the Communist Party in Mexico, and now he was being put in the hot seat by his fellow communists. Stalinists especially had issues with him. Despite devoting his life to the cause, pro-Stalin members deemed him unfit for the role. Outside of his normal issues of being overbearing, self-important, and constantly late, he was seen as a sellout to the current government for taking commissions from them. To them, they believed the government was using Diego's communist art to pose as a more progressive regime than it actually was, co-opting the movement to make it lose its flavor. I feel like this is a really common complaint amongst just like communist theory, which is that the idea that there isn't a subculture and that capitalism can kind of just repackage and sell an idea to you, you know? Like, I mean, think about like, you know, punks or whatnot, right? In the 80s, that was like a cool, unique thing. And now you have Hot Topic, you know? Well, and the kind of, they were Hot Topicing Diego's paintings, right?
It's funny. I've talked about, I realize, sorry, everybody, I've talked about the show Top Gear and or Grand Tour far too much, but it's just one of my favorites and it's great. And there's one episode I was just watching recently as a rerun where they go to China for one reason or another. And Jeremy Clarkson makes this joke of, he's just like, you know, we go to this place where Mao Zedong first started the communist revolution in China, you know, signifying once and for all that capitalism was dead and will never rise again in China. So naturally, our first stop was at the gift shop. And then it just shows them buying copious amounts of like tchotchkes of Mao Zedong, like snow globes and hats and backpacks and all this kind of stuff. And I don't even have to tell you the irony there. Yeah,
man. Just the genuine effort to not be tokenized is, I think, forever in the communist mindset, right? Yeah. And Diego is definitely dealing with that right now because, you know, his paintings were super, super communist. Like, there's no other interpretation that you can take from it if you know anything about communism. But that doesn't mean that capitalists still didn't like his paintings and kind of wanted to use it as sort of a virtue signaling thing. Mm-hmm. I think he thinks, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, he thinks that he is sort of seeping the ideology into the culture when really the culture is sort of taking his ideology out of his paintings. Fair you know enough. What I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the osmosis is going in the other direction.
Yeah.
Now, Diego saw this accusation as an insult to his character. In his eyes, he was seeing Marx's vision through, treating the bourgeois and the proletariat the same. He felt that taking money from big spenders to make communist art was the key to tipping a revolution, not a means to cheapen his ideals. In a startling move, Diego, who devoted his entire life to the party, resigned. One party member recounts the dramatic scene, quote, Diego arrived, sat down, and took out a large pistol and put it on the table. He then put a handkerchief over the pistol and said, I, Diego Rivera, General Secretary of the Mexican Communist Party, accuse the painter, Diego Rivera, of collaborating with the petit bourgeois government of Mexico and of having accepted a commission to paint the stairway of the National Palace of Mexico. This contradicts the politics of the Comintern, and therefore the painter, Diego Rivera, should be expelled from the Communist Party by the General Secretary of the Communist Party, Diego Rivera. Diego declared himself expelled, stood up, removed the handkerchief, picked up the pistol, and shattered it. It was made of clay.
Oh, I was like, how'd you shatter a pistol? It is also so melodramatic.
Literally.
It's one of those, it's like, and it's also one of those.
I imagine the rest of the meeting was like, okay, So next thing on the docket, let's talk about the unions for farmers.
It also like reeks of passing the buck, right? Of being like,
yeah,
like he could have stood up and gone, "Hey, everybody, I got to tell you, like, I took this commission from the government, and I just don't feel right about saying that I'm a communist, and then also like engaging in capitalism." But he does this thing, this very strategic thing of, so let me tell you guys, the painter, Diego Rivera, I think should be expelled. Now, the man, Diego Rivera, is great. And I think is lovely and should be one of the hallowed leaders of the communist. But the painter, Diego Rivera, like, do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Now, he still doesn't think he was doing anything wrong for taking the commission, right? Like, even in the Communist Party, they knew that you got to make money somehow because that's how the world works at the time. Their goal is to, of course, advance the world past capitalistic gains, right? But there's no responsibility taken. He could have had this meeting and been like, guys, I'm literally going to paint Karl Marx on the National Palace of Mexico. Isn't that amazing? This is what we were dreaming of. But instead he was like, no one sees my vision. No one sees how great and awesome I am. And just because I made $1 million, gajillion, bazillion bucks on this, they think I'm a bad communist.
Well, and that's the thing, too, is that he so easily could have been like, hey, everybody, you probably heard I'm doing this massive mural and it's going to be of Karl Marx. And guess what? I know you're thinking it's a capitalistic move. I'm going to donate all of the money that I get to the party,
to the workers,
so we can actually get this going, blah, 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 blah. But he was like, nah, I kind of want the money.
Yeah. Later on in episode 4, we talk about Frida and Diego's house in Mexico, and it is not a humble dwelling. It is not like, you know, your little Trek shack in the middle of the forest. This is like a big multi-million-dollar house.
And this is go to your history class,
pet
kids.
Monkeys at some point. If that gives you an idea of the type of eclectic and wealthy they get later on.
This is how your history class proves to you that communism sounds great and it never works in practice. Why? Because humans are humans and we want the money.
And also because capitalists exist to sort of get in the way of that as well. You know, like there's no... I think this is the issue that they're having here in Mexico, too, is you can be in a room of 30 people that say that we're communists, but then if 5 of those people are a different type of communism that will take multi-$1,000 checks for paintings, then the movement becomes sort of moot, right? Like, you kind of have to all agree on what that means. And if you can't, then things start to go sideways very badly quickly.
But
you know
at the
what I'm
same time, and I promise we'll move on from this very quickly because I don't want this to become a communist debate. But it is one of those two that you go like, but in essence, art can't really exist in a society of communism because that is not a real true contribution to the society in terms of producing goods and, you know, each by his own means and all that kind of stuff. It's like you can try to form an argument that says like, well, art does contribute, but it's like, but does it? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you're ultimately
Karl Marx
just using resources.
Said that, like, the artist wouldn't be necessarily a profession, but a thing that all people do. But like the professional artist, now, of course, even in this time, there are going to be communist theorists who debate that a professional artist is necessary. Diego himself would say so, right? Yeah. But a lot of communists were like, no, once like society gets going and people have all the things that they need, they'll all naturally have enough time to make art on their own. So we won't really need a professional artist, right? Which is, of course, a contradiction to Diego taking tons and tons of money to paint what he wanted.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, yes. Let's move on.
Yes. Frida, as a sign of support to her husband, would leave the party as well. This in no way persuaded them that communism was wrong, but in their eyes, Stalin's grip on the movement was tightening, and the need to only communicate within their own movement was seen as foolish. As a response to being abandoned by the people Diego considered his family, he plunged himself into his work. As for Frida, the alienation of her husband had pushed her to almost take a backseat in her own life. In fact, Frida wouldn't paint for nearly a year after his expulsion. Diego was working around the clock in what some might call a manic episode today, and taking care of him became a full-time job. Putting her own dreams aside to support him, Frida was thrust into the role of a housewife with no experience. And with no one else to turn to, Frida got help from an unlikely source. Lupe Marin, Diego's ex-wife, the same woman who pulled up her skirt to show the crowd her stick legs during the reception party.
Wow.
Yeah. One day, Lupe came by their place, seeing that Frida, now only 20, had no skill in properly stocking a pantry. Lupe took her to El Mercado, the market, to buy cookware and ingredients. She shared recipes with Frida, teaching her to cook the dishes that she used to make for Diego herself. And in exchange, Frida painted a portrait of her. So she's like, listen, if you're gonna deal with Diego, he's a big guy and he's gonna want these enchiladas. So I'm gonna show you how to make these enchiladas. And she's like, I'm not sure if I like you, but sure, come on in. Like that's the sort of relationship they have to start.
Did you come across any records of what Frida was taught to cook?
Ooh, I should try to look. I didn't come across any of it in my own research. But I should have. Yeah, because that'd be another one to shout out to Max.
Shout out to Max. I already have and I've been keeping it a secret from Akiva as well, but the series that I'm currently working on, I've already found a couple of them like, oh, this would be dynamite. So anyway.
Yeah, Frida talked a little bit more about what she drank than what she ate because she was like kind of an alcoholic. She loves pulque, which is like
honestly, it does.
Yeah. In December of 1929, Diego would take the exact kind of commission that put him into hot water with his fellow comrades. An American ambassador to Mexico named Dwight D. Morrow commissioned him to paint at the palace in Cuernavaca, despite being a capitalist who tried to take all the oil rights away from the country. What's more, the subject matter was, oddly, extremely progressive, portraying these Spanish conquistadors as villains and Emiliano Zapata as a hero riding a white horse. Kind of a contradiction if you remember anything from Pancho Villa.
Yep.
Despite the man's history, Diego saw it as a chance to glorify the revolution for the common people, and he agreed. When the Morrow family departed Mexico to work in London, Frida and Diego would stay at their house for the better part of a year, using it as a honeymoon of sorts. In the valley of the two volcanoes, Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl, I just wanted to say those, away from the pain. Thank you. Away from the pain of torn times, their time in Cuernavaca was a montage of love and adventure. Diego painted all day long. Frida explored the city. When the sun set, the two would head into town, finding some restaurant or another, talking away as they drank their tequila. Guests were invited regularly, and each one inspired Diego to talk and talk until Frida would be so tired that she would leave her guests to her drunken husband, who she affectionately called El Monstruo, the monster, and to go to bed early, right? So they start drinking. He's just talking and talking and talking. She's like, all right, fuck it, I'm going home.
My only frame of reference for anything else that I can think of named Monstro is the whale from Pinocchio. Was named Monstro.
There we go.
Dude, Diego's
so
getting
funny.
it hard from us.
Yeah, man. Yeah, he kind of deserves it. As a result of their more leisurely life in Cuernavaca, Frida began to paint for the first time since they got married. She finished up that portrait of Lupe Marin, painted the native children she met on her days out, and most likely made her 1930 self-portrait. Very different from the European style she used in her portrait for Alejandro Gomez, Frida's skin tone is a golden brown with red lips and pink cheeks. She wears her hair slicked back and her ears are adorned with dangling wire spheres trailing with beads. The background is plain, with nothing but the chair back in the wall, and in her first portrait, Frida painted herself slim and lithe, attempting to evoke the sex appeal of the Roaring Twenties, but here, the portrait is far more frank. She's still a while away from the surrealism that Frida's known for, but the honesty is starting to show itself in her work. Instead of a knowing, alluring look like in her first one, Frida looks almost reserved, as if there's a painful secret she hopes isn't revealed.
I'm looking at it right now.
Turns out, yeah. She like looks a little bit more alive. The other one definitely was like a call to a lover, whereas this one seems like a bit more of like a honest portrait. Like, this is exactly how I imagine she looked at this age. You know what I'm saying?
I do. It's weird to say. I think I actually do prefer the earlier one more. Yeah. I think it's more technically interesting, but I do know what you mean. And this one feels a lot more, there's less romance to it, I would say.
Yeah. It's like she just looked at herself in the mirror and took a snapshot of it and put it into a painting, right?
Except that I will say, like, because I've had to, like, when I make the thumbnails and stuff for the show, I've had to find pictures, like actual pictures of Frida, you know? She definitely amps up her unibrow in the paintings. Like, yeah, she has some connection in real life or whatever. Like, there's some hairs there or whatever, but it's not nearly as exaggerated as her paintings of herself.
Yeah. And I think it's also comes into the Mexicanidad movement, right? Like, the idea of body hair being stigmatized in a certain way was seen as Eurocentric, whereas here she's trying to sort of pronounce her Mexicanness, so to speak, because this for her felt like more of like a native look, right? And she always, I don't want to say problematically, because she did represent like native Mexico fairly well, but as somebody who is only maybe like a quarter native Mexican, she really, really emphasized that part of herself because I think of the cultural movement.
Oh, right? Yeah. I keep forgetting that she was not like full blood Mexican.
Yeah. Because her mom was half Spanish, half Mixtec. No. I can't remember, but it was in one of the previous episodes. German. And then her dad was German and possibly Jewish. Yeah.
I mean, even just thinking of her as half German is already a weird thing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
The name Frida, right? Like, that's a German name. In fact, in the U.S., we'll talk about it later, she goes by the name Carmen because of the anti-German sentiment.
Wow. Okay, interesting.
Right? And it turns out that, you know, we were talking about this painful secret that we can kind of see in this painting, and it turns out there was a bit of a painful secret. While the beginning of her time in Cuernavaca was sunshine and roses, Frida was soon devastated when she realized that, despite all odds, she became pregnant, only to discover that she would have to abort her first child with Diego.
Oh.
Yeah. Due to the nature of her injuries, the fetus was growing in the incorrect position, and she had to say goodbye to her first chance at motherhood only 3 months in.
Ugh.
Frida writes in her journal, quote, "We couldn't have a child, and I cried inconsolably, but I distracted myself by cooking, dusting the house, sometimes by painting, and every day going to accompany Diego on the scaffold. It gave him great pleasure when I arrived with a midday meal in a basket covered in flowers."
And then I set the base on fire.
And setting it on fire. She's still sad, consoling herself, like crying, but also lighting scaffolding on fire.
Image of her. This is terrible. Her like sobbing and then using like the flint and rock, like trying to get a fire going.
You don't have to do that. Hey, Frida, can you? No, stop.
Weirdly, though,
as she's walking away.
That does feel like a very Frida move, though. Like, I could, in my mind, I could sort of strangely see it. She's like, it's sad, but it's beautiful. Like,
and Diego's like, could you let me down first before you do that? As Frida did what she could to distract herself, by the time 1929 rolled around, Mexico had reached yet another tipping point in politics. The Calles presidency had chewed out all the flavor in the communist movements of Mexico, and military spending was on a rise. Leftist movements were no longer tolerated the way they used to be. A new organization called the Gold Shirts, or the Camisas Doradas, had hit the scene, fashioned after Italian fascism, with a funding from a new, insidious political party from Germany. La Camisas Doradas had an agenda like all other so-called National Socialists, to purify their country of communists, Jews, and left-leaning political figures. Being all three, Diego and Frida decided they would be better off if they left the country altogether.
Interesting. So wait. They were basically afraid that the effects of Nazism and fascism were going to bleed over into Mexico?
Well, it already was. So the Camisas Doradas were basically a Nazi-funded organization, sort of modeled after the Italian, I think they called them the blue shirts in Italy. I can't remember what the name was. But basically there was, in each country, there was a blank shirts. We had the silver shirts here in the United States, the gold shirts in Mexico, and a couple of other shirt regimes in other places. And their job was to say, oh, well, we're National Socialists, so we're a little different than the other socialists that you guys like. Do you mind if we just take your communists and maybe kill them and throw away all of the Jews and immigrants and foreigners?
Wow.
And that's like kind of how Nazism sort of snuck its way into a lot of different countries, including Mexico.
I did not know
so, that. You know, being a devout, extremely public communist couple, right? Diego and Frida were like, okay, we got to get out of here. let's find another place to go.
Jeez.
Yeah. Diego specifically was under fire more than most. While the right wing accused him of being a revolutionary, inciting domestic terrorism through his paintings, the Communist Party considered him a government agent and a bootlicker, willing to paint for millionaires. Luckily for Diego, fashions travel slowly, and while Mexico was ready to spit all over his frescoes, Americans couldn't get enough of them. Rivera had become a legend stateside, so in mid-November 1930, Frida would accompany her husband to America, or as Frida would call it, Gringolandia. Their first stop on a grand tour that would last nearly 5 years was San Francisco. Diego, a sucker for irony, had taken on a job painting a mural for the Pacific Stock Exchange Tower. Diego saw San Francisco... Isn't that hilarious, by the way? Diego saw San Francisco as an opportunity to test his theory of revolutionary art in the most capitalistic country in the world. For the first...
I'm just laughing at Diego Rivera, like the audacity of this guy to be like, no, bear with me, guys. I'm going to demonstrate communism by painting stuff that I'm hired to do on one of the main trading hubs, the stock exchanges in San Francisco, one of the biggest capitalistic symbols of America. I know what you're thinking. Hang on.
You're thinking I'm an idiot for doing this, but let me tell you, when they see my painting, they're going to throw away all of the millions and millions of dollars they have.
Right. They're going to
give it to charity.
Wait a second. That came from a communist? Sign me up.
Throws a suitcase full of money into a train car of, disenfranchised workers.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, this guy, he had a very grandiose idea of what his art could do. And sometimes he did some really cool stuff. We'll talk about it later on. But for the most part, he was being taken in for a fool, right?
Or he just was a fool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm sorry, but when you give me that example, and then there's that example of when he quit the Communist Party in Mexico, I don't get the sense from Diego Rivera that he was this truly genuine communist. I think he was
person for the people. Yeah.
Right. I think he was I think it's a good idea and I'm kind of with it or whatever. But really what I want to do is make a lot of money. And I don't want to make you all think that that's what I want to do. So I'm going to try to mask it in this sort of way that makes you think that it feels like a bunch of mental gymnastics that he's trying to perform.
That's, you know what? I think that's a fair point. The one thing that I would argue for him, which I don't find myself doing very often for Diego, but the one thing that I'll argue for him is that he does get himself into quite a bit of trouble based off of his political ideals. Not only does he make money off of it, but he does screw himself over big time in episode 4 with one of these painting for the rich schemes.
Okay.
Right. So, for the first 2 months in San Francisco, Diego didn't work, so the two would spend their days exploring the city. They lived with the sculptor Raph Stackpole, who helped convince the U.S. government to allow these two communists to visit in the first place. During that time, Frida would hang out with fellow artists, including famous photographer Edward Weston and social realist painter Arnold Blanche. Arnold's wife, Lisa Blanche, gives an insight into their time there. Quote, "Since they didn't have a phone, they used ours. Frida did not set herself up as an artist. We were both painters, yet we didn't talk about art. Frida and I were like a couple of giggling girls. She scintillated in her talk, making fun of everything and everybody, laughing at things sportively and perhaps snobbishly. She was very critical if she thought something was pretentious and often laughed at San Franciscans." Sounds like Frida. Frida and Diego would explore the city, looking through the narrow streets out into the bay as cargo ships unloaded goods from across the world, and they even went to their first football game. To the two Mexicans, America was obsessed with sports, and soon one of them became obsessed with an athlete. Diego, having watched a tennis match, became infatuated with Helen Wills, a champion at the time. As he began to paint his murals, Helen would be his new muse, standing in for Diego as, quote, "California's representative woman." Soon, Diego would begin sketching her relentlessly, following her to matches and sometimes not coming home for days.
Oh, shocking.
Yeah, right?
Also, the idea of Frida being at a football game is really funny. I can just imagine her, just looking around, sort of you know,
like, what are they doing? Is someone going to get shot or
not afraid? But her looking around, just going like, I don't understand this and why you people like this at all. And everybody like cheering and her just sitting down and like staring straight ahead stoically, you know?
We don't talk about this painting in the series because there's too many paintings of hers to get through, but there is one that she does in New York called My Dress Hangs Here. And in it, there are these two pillars, like two ionic pillars, and one of them is a golf prize, like a golf trophy, and then the other one is a toilet, because she's like, Americans are obsessed with two things, indoor plumbing and sports, and I don't know what it is.
And according to Mark Twain, also ice water, yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. Diego's infidelity was one of their biggest points of friction, one that I think the Salma Hayek movie puts pretty perfectly. Frida knew that she was married to a man with an insatiable lust for women, and that he was too selfish or too stuck in his ways to change. So instead of expecting monogamy from him, she expected loyalty to her, first and foremost. At least at this point, Frida was almost amused by the old man's affairs, and she took pleasure in snatching up his prey, if she could get to them, almost like a cat hunting mice, even though she knew she wouldn't be able to catch every one that skittered away into the walls. So she was like, listen, go out, go do your thing. But if I catch you with them, it's free game. And two, I'm your number one, right? Like you have to be, maybe you're not monogamous, but you're loyal to me, right? And that was sort of their understanding.
Okay, wait.
I don't think she liked it, but it was,
I was like, hey, wait, whatever floats your boat, guys, all good.
So, for example, in one instance, Frida would find herself at a dinner party with a prospective mistress who latched onto her husband throughout the night. The girl, wrapped up in Diego's storytelling, leaned in closer and closer, staring unblinkingly at Frida's husband. Instead of throwing dishes and screaming like Lupe Marin might have done in the past, she just slowly began to hum a Mexican folk song. As the two looked into each other's eyes, her voice grew louder and louder until she was belting curses in Spanish, evaporating the sexual tension in the room. Diego knew exactly what it meant, and he spent the rest of the night being a gentleman, at least while she could see.
It's like passive-aggressive self-defense, if you could say it like that. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
She wasn't going to confront, but she's like, I'm going to make it really uncomfortable to where you're going to stop. I kind of respect
that. Yeah. I imagine like that girl must have been kind of terrified to just hear some lady just like screaming curses in Spanish and slamming on the table, getting louder and louder during this, nice dinner conversation that they're probably having with some fancy rich Americans.
But Frida, although is an objectively beautiful woman, there's a fierceness to her look that I could imagine was also very intimidating as well.
A lot of people mentioned that, right? During Diego's time painting, womanizing, and giving speeches, Frida would explore the city all by herself. She especially loved Chinatown, writing to her friends, quote, "The city and the bay are overwhelming. What is especially fantastic is Chinatown. The Chinese are immensely simpatico, and never in my life have I seen such a beautiful children as the Chinese ones. I'd love to steal one so you could see for yourself. It did make sense to come here because it opened my eyes, and I've seen an enormous number of new and beautiful things."
That's... Oh, it's funny.
Yeah.
It's always one of those weird ones where it's like, I think everybody knows one of those old people who goes like, it's a beautiful people, the Chinese. They're a beautiful people, the Chinese are. And you're like, tone it down. Just like, I hear you and like, I get you and that's cool and everything, but like, it's sort of weird.
Yeah, exactly. While Frida felt free amongst the immigrants of the city, she was less than thrilled by the general population, especially the ones who circled her husband as he began to furiously paint day and night. In one letter, she writes, quote, "I don't particularly like the gringo people. They're boring and they all have faces like unbaked rolls, especially the old women." Which I think is hilarious.
I understand.
Daniel's just nodding. Like, yeah.
Yep.
It's like when Shalyn and I went to like Miami, we like spent a week there and we're like, wow, everybody is just so pretty. And then we come back to Denver and we're like, oh, Oh, so dry, so windswept.
Yeah.
Zootopia 2 has come home to Disney Plus.
Let's go!
Get ready for a new case.
We're the greatest partners of all time!
New friends.
Gary the Snake.
And your last name?
The Snake.
Dream Team. New habitats.
Zootopia has a secret reptile population.
You can watch the record-breaking phenomenon at home. Zootopia 2, now available on Disney Plus, rated PG. And right now you can get Disney Plus and Hulu for just $4.99 a month for 3 months with a special limited time offer. Ends March 24th. After 3 months, plan auto-renews at $12.99 a month. Terms apply.
Refreshing wild cherry cola meets smooth cream. The treat you deserve. Pepsi Wild Cherry and Cream. Treat yourself.
I don't know. Which is why, by the way, since for day one when I moved to Colorado, I've put on face moisturizer every single day. And I think it's one of the reasons, like I've talked to people that live in like the Carolinas and they're like, how old are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm 37. And they're like, really? I would have thought you were like 30. And I'm like,
everybody needs lotion.
Well,
listen, if you're listening to this today, find a lotion near you.
No, it is true, dude. Like it really does affect you a lot.
Despite being unsure of her new environment, Frida would make friends of her own, most notably Dr. Leo Eloesser. Eloesser is an interesting character all by himself. Dr. Eloesser was a true humanitarian who volunteered in Russia, South America, and China, and he was a member of the Lincoln Brigade in the Spanish Republican Army of 1938. After his retirement in 1952, he was a family medicine doctor in Tecámbaro near Michoacán, Mexico. Outside of work, he was a fantastic sailor, known to take midnight trips on his 32-foot sloop, sailing around the bay, often visiting his most dire patients late into the night. According to his friends, Leo would sometimes arrive at the hospital as early as 3 a.m. just to check on patients that were in critical condition. No one knew when he slept. And it was a good thing that Frida had met Dr. Leo because her body was revolting against her once more. This time, her right foot had begun to turn outward, straining her tendons so badly that walking around the city became harder and harder to do. Dr. Eloesser would find himself at Dr. Eloesser would find himself to be Frida's PCP for life, answering any of her medical questions. In fact, during her time, she was able to spot that Frida was beginning to develop scoliosis, which she likely had since she was a child, as well as identify a missing vertebrae in her spine. I'm wondering about that missing vertebrae. Is it like a thing that she was born with? Was it one that underdeveloped? Was it one that got like blasted out by the impact of the bus? I have no idea.
I was going to say, I would imagine that it had something to do with the accident in that, like, I mean, she was basically crushed, right? And I bet in the surgeries, they were like, oh, this bone is crushed, out with it. And then they didn't really, I mean, it was in like, what was it, like 1924 or something?
Yeah. 1920, I think, just flat.
So yeah, I mean, it's not like the surgeons back then were these, supreme knowledge holders of how the human body functioned. I think they had a good understanding, but I don't think they really understood a lot of it.
Yeah, you need all of them. As a thank you for his help, Frida painted Dr. Eloesser's portrait. My primary source author, Hayden Herrera, makes an interesting connection during this time. It seems that if you were to get a portrait from Frida, the more she liked you as a person, the weirder your painting would be. For instance, Jean White, the wife of one of Diego's assistants, would receive a technically stunning, perfectly average portrait, even though Frida found her to be an obnoxious hypochondriac, complaining to Frida about her supposed illness, as Frida herself walked with a cane. On the other hand, Dr. Eloesser's portrait resembled one of Diego's stout, stocky figures with proportions more like an Aztec figurine than a real person.
Interesting.
So, yeah, like the more she liked you, the weirder your portrait was.
It's almost feels like there's an element where she says, like, there's more that she wants to express about you. Therefore,
than what she can see, yeah.
There's more that's being represented in the work, versus if she sees you as somebody who's very two-dimensional, then that's
what you're gonna get.
Yeah, right. It's the surface level, and there's nothing beyond it, which I think is pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah. So before the two would leave San Francisco, Frida would complete one more painting for a famous horticulturist named Luther Burbank. Having been responsible for developing hundreds of strains of fruits and vegetables, Frida must have liked him quite a bit, since this was likely Frida's first attempt at true surrealist art. In it, the horticulturist becomes part of the plant himself, with his legs ending in roots which dig deep into the ground as they take nutrients from a human body buried below. While Frida was known to draw cartoon skulls on her letters in the hospital as a teen, this was the first depiction of a theme that continues throughout her work: death begetting life. Luther's plants grow strong and healthy from the vitality that they extract from the corpse below. Yeah, kind of interesting portrait. And after gifting her portrait to Mr. Burbank and writing a goodbye letter to Dr. LOSer, the two continued on their tour of Gringolandia. First, they made a pit stop in Mexico to approve plans for a new house being built before making their way to New York City. When Diego was finishing up his mural at the National Palace in Mexico, he had received an invitation by none other than the art collector for Nelson Rockefeller to participate in the new institution that they were brainstorming called the New York Museum of Modern Art.
Wow.
Right?
That's super cool. And really quick question for you on that Burbank fellow.
Yeah, portrait of Luther Burbank, yeah.
Luther Burbank. And maybe this is an office hours question, but the city of Burbank in Los Angeles, do we know if there's any connection there?
I have no idea. It's highly possible because the city would have still been developing at the time.
Well, and what initially popped into my mind is where you're like, horticulturalist, fruit trees. Los Angeles was massively just orchards for long periods of time into the 40s and 50s. And then it started to develop even further beyond that. And I'm kind of wondering if he had something to do with the orchards of that area. And then when it was established as a city, they just called it Burbank after his contributions.
Yeah, I didn't see it when I was
out of my butt. I'm just wondering if this is
totally. I didn't see it when I was browsing over his sort of like biography, but it's highly possible. We should check it out for office hours.
Yeah, I'll put a note.
Making a name for himself in San Francisco was one thing, but being in the Modern Art Museum was another entirely, and he wasn't simply offered a single display. A. Conger Goodyear, yes, that Goodyear family, who was the museum's president at the time, gave him a room to exhibit 143 paintings, watercolors, and drawings, along with 7 mobile frescoes. What Diego saw as an enchanting time working to spread the revolution across the United States, it seemed more and more to be a demonstration of how the wealthy had the power to tokenize anything. In one instance, Abby Aldrich, John D. Rockefeller's wife, would ask Diego to paint his famous anti-capitalist fresco, Night of the Rich, on her ceiling. The original painting, by the way, depicted the Rockefeller family in grotesque caricature eating ticker tape from the stock exchange.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, it's like this crazy, like, Night of the Rich, right? And Abby Aldrich, who's John Rockefeller's wife, was like, oh, could you just paint that on our ceiling? It's like, oh, wow, you just, like, the way that they just, like, were like, oh, that's so interesting. Wow, you got Grandpa looking really interesting eating all of those stock exchange papers. Yeah, I want that on my wall. Diego refused, however, knowing that it would trivialize his political views. But there were plenty of times he was taken in by the sights and sounds of the ultra-wealthy. While Frida would continue to support his mission, his art, and his lifestyle, she became far more jaded with America at large. Writing to her new friend, Dr. LOSer, she tells him about how tired she is of hanging out with, quote, the right people. High society here turns me off, and I feel a bit of rage against all these rich guys here, since I have seen thousands of people in the most terrible misery without anything to eat and no place to sleep. That is what has most impressed me here. It's terrifying to see the rich having parties day and night, while thousands and thousands of people are dying of hunger. Although I'm very interested in all the industrial and mechanical development of the United States, I find that Americans completely lack sensibility and good taste. I don't know if I'm mistaken. I'm only telling you what I feel. Whenever she was away from Diego, which was a lot, as New York socialites wanted his attention for one reason or another, she would hang out with the friends she had met in NYC, most notably Diego's assistant, Lucien Bloch, and the Mexican Jewish writer, Anita Brenner. Frida's favorite pastime in New York was going to the movies, especially if it was Three Stooges or horror movies. Lucien recalls on one occasion that Frida particularly loved watching Frankenstein and asked to go see it again and again right after they got out of the theater.
Shocking.
Right?
That seems so right up Frida's alley. I was not expecting Three Stooges as something that she loved, but that's awesome.
If you look at some of her, I don't think we talk about it maybe in episode 4, but one of her paintings, A Few Small Nips, is like this total horror painting, but there is like a sense of comedy to it as well.
Okay.
Like there's like a silly little banner drawn over it, and it's depicting like a murder scene. So she like had this mix of like very dark sort of Mexican humor and, you know, a love for the macabre, of course.
Yeah.
Right?
No, Frankenstein feels like hand in hand for somebody like Frida, of like, wait, you collected body parts and stitched them together, then made it come alive again. It's like death becoming life. Like
exactly, right?
So her brand, you know?
Totally her brand. By the end of their first visit to New York, Diego Rivera is arguably the world's most famous artist, and certainly the most famous muralist of his time. His exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art was a huge success, and as a result, Rivera would accept a new commission, this time by the Ford Motor Company through the Detroit Institute of the Arts. After seeing Diego's love for industrialization, Ford believed that he could capture the essence of the company and its greatness. Their first impressions of Motor City, however, were less than welcoming, so now they're hopping over to Detroit. Frida and her husband would find themselves at the Wardell apartment hotels, where they discovered that the business was a strict no Jews establishment.
Whoa.
Immediately upon hearing this, Diego shouted to the staff loud enough for reporters to hear, quote, "But Frida and I have Jewish blood. We're going to have to leave." Urgent to have the world-famous painter not sink their reputation, the staff countered by saying, "Oh, no, we don't mean it that way." The two of them would refuse to back down until the hotel staff agreed to lift the no Jews restriction for all customers. What do you mean we don't mean it that way?
I know.
First of all,
what way do you mean it? Like, what other way could
like
you
the
possibly
ones
mean
with
it?
The curly hair, you don't look like, I mean, it's just like, it's the, the ones from, because they all.
No. We were talking about like the Woody Allen Jews, like the real.
Like, yeah, you guys are fine. It's also like, the implications, too, are like he's literally painting for Henry Ford right now. Like,
which I was going to comment on. It's once again, it's one of these Diego Rivera isms of like, bro, you claim to be representing communism, and then you're now going to be hired by arguably the most capitalistic company currently working in the United States.
They literally gave them Saturdays off so that they could spend more money. That was Henry Ford's whole reasoning for the modern weekend.
That's crazy.
But, his argument would be is, in a communist world, industrialization is very important because industrialization means that more people work less, which means that they can distribute labor better. So factories and things like that are really important to see the communist plan go through, right? If it isn't for machinery that helps take the labor off of the people, then they can't see the vision through. But he is 100% ignoring the blatant reality of who his employer is as a person.
But
right?
Not only that, it's that idea of like, oh yeah, no, the mechanization of all of this is going to make it so that people don't have to do as much. But like the mechanization also makes for more rapid creation of product. And where's that product going? To other nations that are in capitalistic societies.
Yes.
Like, wait,
yes.
So you're... Oh boy, Diego. Like,
yeah. There's a lot of things that I find that Diego ignores, and he just tries to look at the positives. He's like, look at we have a factory. We can make a car for every person, even though it's more like we could make a car for every person who has the money to buy a car. Like that's not the same thing as just handing them out. Yeah. But
okay, whatever.
Yes, exactly. So for months, Diego studied factories all across the city, sketching up elements of the Ford plant that he wanted to capture. It was one of the most productive and manic painting seasons of his life. During its construction, he and his assistants would work nearly 15 hours a day, and Diego would lose around 100 pounds due to overwork, as well as a new diet that Frida had been preparing for him at the request of his doctors.
Well.
Another hilarious irony, by the way. During the time that he was painting this mural, his painters went on strike for not being paid well enough. For being overworked and not being paid well enough. They started their own mini union against Diego.
That is supreme irony right there.
Right?
That's really funny.
Frida would find herself attending dinner parties much like the ones she did in New York, but this time with less enthusiasm as before. In New York, a city used to people from around the world, Frida's Mexican style of dress was a novelty, but in Detroit, it was a target for ridicule. Frida was no longer the demure wife of Diego. However, she had regained her cachucha spirit, and as time went on in America, instead of allowing herself to be gawked at, Frida was known to intentionally cause a scene. In one instance, Frida was invited to tea at the house of Henry Ford's sister, where she loudly espoused her communist beliefs about primitive accumulation and the inherent theft of private ownership. In another, she made sarcastic jokes about Catholicism to a God-fearing socialite, but my favorite had to be when she was dining with none other than Henry Ford himself. Famously, Ford was not only anti-Semitic, but as far as I can tell, he and his son would contribute to the Nazi war effort in their plants in Europe. The opportunity was too good for Frida to pass up, and at a silent moment during dinner, Frida asks innocently, "Mr. Ford, are you Jewish?"
Jeez, man. I like it.
She also just because English was her second language and she spoke like a broken English, she knew that people kind of took her for a bit of an idiot, right? Because a lot of people just assume that about her. And she used that to her own advantage, where she'd be like, what does son of a bitch mean? Can you tell me? Like if somebody said something stupid, I saw this on the street the other day. Someone called someone a son of a bitch. What does that mean?
I hear you use this phrase, a motherfucker. What does this mean? I can see it now, and I would be cracking up if I was there.
Diego was, it's funny because, on one hand, that was his employer, but on the other hand, Diego laughed his ass off about the Mr. Ford, are you Jewish thing. He thought it was so funny.
Good.
Unfortunately, Frida's antics weren't enough to keep her really very happy in the U.S. Writing to Dr. Eloesser, quote, "I don't like it at all, but I'm happy because Diego is working very happily here. He's enchanted with the factories, the machines, etc., like a child with a new toy. The industrial part of Detroit is really most interesting. The rest is, as in all of the United States, ugly and stupid." Frida's displeasure with the States had just as much to do with the anti-Semitic, colorless crowd she had to associate with as it did with really her own body. As always, her leg was acting up again, this time developing a trophic ulcer on her foot, but on May 26th, a 25-year-old Frida revealed to Dr. Eloesser that she was once again 2 months pregnant.
Oof.
Initially, Dr. Platt of the Henry Ford Hospital gave her castor oil and quinine to try to abort the embryo, but when that didn't work, he changed his mind and told her to carry it to term. Which, by the way, castor oil, quinine are not abortants. They are not medicines that you can actually use to abort a child. So I think he was either the medicine wasn't up to date, or he was giving her a sugar pill to try to get her to carry the child to term.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Trusting her intuition, Frida sent a letter to Dr. Eloesser in San Francisco asking for his opinion. On one hand, she desperately wanted a child with Diego, but on the other, after her abortion in Cuernavaca, she knew in her gut that her body just wasn't capable of the intense transformation required. There's also legislation to keep in mind. Even in her letter to the doctor, she told him to disguise his response since abortions were highly illegal in the U.S. Now, I checked in Mexico. It was illegal, but the regulation wasn't really in place, so having an abortion was much more doable there.
Sure.
She noticed that only 2 months into this pregnancy, she was spotting even more than last time, and her body was revolting against her. Quote, "I want to vomit all the time, and I'm fed up. I get tired from everything since my spine hurts, and I'm also rather bothered by the thing of the foot since I cannot exercise, and as a result, my digestion is just not functioning." By the time Dr. Eloesser responded, however, Frida resolved to carry the baby to term. As a result, her friend Lucienne Bloch, the same one who took her to see Frankenstein in New York, stayed at the Rivera's hotel to keep her company, since Diego was still painting 15 hours a day. Summer approached, and with it a sweltering heat that made Frida's condition even worse. She started feeling pain in her uterus, even more spotting, and nausea attacks that lasted hours. Frida, with the false hope given to her by American doctors, fell into denial. Lucienne recalled this in Hayden Herrera's book, quote, "She was just hoping to be pregnant. So I said, 'Have you seen the doctor?' She said, 'Yes, I have a doctor, but he tells me I can't do this, I can't do that, and that's a lot of bunk.'" On July 4th, 1932, Frida would lose her second child. Lucienne's diary recalls, quote, "Sunday evening, Frida was blue and menstruating so. She went to bed and the doctor told her, as usual, that it was nothing and that she must be quiet. In the night, I heard the worst cries of despair, thinking Diego would call me if he needed me. I only dozed and had nightmares. At 5, Diego rushed into the room all disheveled and pale and asked me to call a doctor. He came at 6 with an ambulance and got her, in the agonies of birth, out of the pool of blood that she had made and the huge clots of blood she kept losing. She looked so tiny, 12 years old. Her tresses were wet with tears." Oof. Frida was rushed to the Henry Ford Hospital. As she was being rushed into her room, fading in and out of consciousness, Frida remembers pointing up at the pipes near the ceiling in all different colors, saying, "Mira, Diego, qué precioso." Look, Diego, how beautiful.
Jeez, dude. It's brutal.
Yeah. Then, while waiting to hear about Frida's condition, Diego and Lucienne went to the 4th of July parade?
Jeez.
Really? I just wrote this in my notes. I was going to change the wording, but I just wrote, went to the 4th of July parade? 7 question marks. Really? I can't make sense of this, but Lucienne writes in her diary, quote, "Hastings tried to cheer him, Diego, up by going with all of us to the 4th of July parade. In my mind, there was all the time the big chunks of blood and Frida's screaming. Diego thought the same. He thinks that a woman to stand such pain is far superior to a man who would never stand the pain of childbirth." Okay, dude, if you can sympathize with the pain of childbirth, why are you watching a parade right now?
Yeah,
You're not in the...
What is it in Frida's life where, like, every time that she's doomed in a hospital state, everybody that loves her is like, "You're fine, right?" And then, like, just leaves her completely alone.
Literally.
What is this?
God. Like, anytime something absolutely tragic happens, they're like, "All right, I'm gonna fuck off now." Like,
you good? You good? As she's screaming through the hallways, they're like, "Yeah, she's fine."
Diego's just like mildly sad, licking a snow cone. Like, must be so hard for her. Like, I don't understand.
Oh my gosh.
Man, it confused me so much. I was like, I'm just gonna throw it in here because I like read it multiple times, and then I realized 4th of July parade, she lost her baby on 4th of July. This was the same day.
That's nuts, dude.
I don't even understand. I hope I'm wrong about this, but I don't think I am. Like, this is the same day.
Hopefully this is giving everybody a good example as to why we're giving Diego Rivera so much shit throughout this series.
Literally.
Kind of deserves it, maybe?
Yeah, man.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently he couldn't stand the pain of waiting inside the hospital the day of her miscarriage either. Frida spent 13 days in the hospital, hearing the death throes of a man in the room next to her because they were split by a curtain and the guy was dying.
Oh my God.
The hot summer air dried the tears and blood which poured across her body onto her skin, increasing her sense of dread. The child had, quote, disintegrated in her womb, and she spent her nights crying into Diego's chest that she no longer wanted to be alive.
Good Lord.
Yeah. 5 days into her stay at the Henry Ford Hospital, she began to draw. First, a self-portrait, but then later she asked her doctors to see the remains of what was left of her child. The doctors refused, over and over again, worrying that if Frida saw what was left of her baby, it would worsen her condition. Finally, Diego pulled the doctor aside, telling him, quote, "You are not dealing with an average person. Frida will do something with it. She will do an artwork." Still, they refused to show her her baby, and in the end, Diego bought her a medical book, and Frida would use it to carefully draw studies of a male fetus.
Jeez, dude.
Yeah. Diego describes her painting after the miscarriage, quote, "Frida began to work on a series of masterpieces which had no precedent in the history of art. Paintings which exalted the feminine qualities of endurance, truth, reality, cruelty, and suffering. Never before had a woman put such agonized poetry on canvas as Frida did at this time in Detroit." The result of this tragic moment in her life was a painting named Henry Ford Hospital.
Jeez, dude.
Yeah. This, in my opinion, is the moment where Frida's art becomes distinctive in a way that anyone could recognize as Frida. The painting is set on a desolate brown landscape. Far in the background, these smokestacks of Detroit puff away in what looks like a hot, slightly cloudy day. The hospital itself is nowhere to be seen, almost as if it had evaporated around its main subject, Frida. Painted in a primitivistic style, Frida lies naked and bleeding on a 4-post metal bed frame with white sheets. A tear runs down her cheek as her arm reaches down to grasp the floating strings near her stomach, all of which are tied off to 6 subjects floating in the desolate landscape. Surrounding her is an anatomical display of a woman's stomach, a fetus, a snail, a machine, an orchid, and a pelvic bone laid bare. As if they were icons from a tarot card, each one represents another facet of the pain she suffered in Detroit. The pain of being dehumanized by doctors, losing her child, her own body's refusal to cooperate with her wishes, the fragility of her own beauty and sexualities in the eyes of men and herself, and the slow, painful process of her own child growing only to die. It's, yeah.
I'm looking at it right now, and it's pretty horrific. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's very
hard to look at, right?
Yeah. It's I'm glad you explained it a little bit more, because I was like, okay, I'm with you. Okay, like machines, gotcha. Oh, okay, flower, gotcha. What's the snail doing there? But like,
that is the slow, painful process of her birth.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I didn't understand the snail either. This is, man, like every time I do a biography, I think that I don't care about a thing, and then there's a certain moment that makes me care. I did not care about Frida's paintings or Frida's surrealist art, but getting to Henry Ford Hospital and looking at it with the context makes it all the more intense. I can't call it beautiful because it, like you said, it is pretty grotesque. Like it's, you're watching something that seems like almost makes you queasy, right? Like the strings that are attached to each one almost look like veins, and there's blood, and there's a woman laid bare in a desolate landscape. This isn't a thing that you look at like a Renaissance painting and think, wow, so pretty. But it is a journal of what she feels.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
we'll talk about this a little bit more in episode, I think 5, I want to say.
Okay. Yeah. And they say any reaction to art is a good reaction. So I suppose that's very true in this instance. But it is, I mean, it's challenging to look at, I would say.
Yeah. I would say a lot of Frida's paintings are like that, right?
Yeah.
We talk about this a little bit later on when she starts to hang out with surrealists, right? But I think her art differs from other surrealists because, when you look at the melting clocks of, Salvador Dali or something, right? It's supposed to sort of be like a dreamscape, and maybe there's a meaning there, but really it's just supposed to be like you're going into your mind's eye and just painting whatever without any convention.
Sure.
Hers is surreal, but it is trying to depict a real scenario.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is obviously not what she looked like when she was having her miscarriage, but this is a journal of her feelings and experiences, and everything has a strong representation, right? In almost like a religious iconography kind of simplistic way. That like to an observer who wouldn't know Frida, wouldn't know her circumstance, you'd be like, oh, this is obviously just like all the other surreal stuff. Like this is just like weird stuff that she came up with. No, this is her at Henry Ford Hospital and what happened to her in the months previous to it, right?
Have you seen a picture of people looking at the picture? Because it's tiny, the painting itself.
Yeah. This was painted in partially in the hospital, right? So
yeah, the canvas itself is just really small. I would say it's maybe 15, 16 inches across by 12 inches tall kind of a thing. It's not large.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about her method for painting, which is what's called a retablo, which is a style of painting in Mexico, a devotional painting. You'd often find these in like churches.
I could see that.
Where they were painted on tin, and generally they're supposed to depict an accident that God saved them from.
Interesting.
Frida kind of plays with that, but instead of painting an accident that God saved someone from, she paints an accident where no one came to save her, right? But in that same sort of style, so that there's a sort of a dark irony there. We talk about that a little bit when we go over a few small nips in the next episode. But
interestingly, I don't know if this has been observed I'm sure it has, by other people that are much more learned about this than me, but there is also, weirdly, looking at it from just like backing up for a second from it, there is a weird, strange Germanic quality to it as well. Like a harshness and a brutality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anyway, just a quick comment.
Yeah, I can see that because Guillermo was kind of like that too. Like her father was like very, I don't know, frank, right? Frida is, if anything, is frank, which is weird when you're looking at like representative artwork. You're like, oh, obviously it's veiled. It is so not. Like
Right.
it is. There are icons to represent it, but it is very brutally honest.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And it's a weird comparison, but it's like I had a friend that used to tell me German jokes, right? So one of the German jokes being, what did the farmer say when a whirlwind was destroying his crops? A whirlwind is destroying my crops.
Yeah,
that's a German.
That's kind of
joke. And, but you get the point that it's so direct. There's no frill to it, you know.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, this tear represents the pain. It's like, this is my body naked on a
Right.
hospital bed, and I've lost my child. Like
Right.
it's almost like I want you to feel uncomfortable because this was uncomfortable for me, and everybody keeps ignoring it and going to 4th of July parades.
Right.
You know, like.
Yeah.
So I really found that one fascinating and it felt like a milestone. So I wanted to include that one.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's weird to say beautiful because it sort of is in its own sort of way, but you said grotesque, which I think is more accurate.
Yeah.
But for those curious,
grotesquely honest. Yeah.
Yeah, worth looking at.
Mm-hmm. Henry Ford Hospital, as simply done as it is an incredibly delicate, brutal, and exposed look at the pain Frida felt physically, personally, psychologically, and socially through the experience of a failed pregnancy. It shows us how an experience like that truly affects all aspects of one's being. Frida, despite the despair that she would let out through paint and ink, tried to see this less as a tragedy and more as a near miss with La Pelona, death. La Pelona, I should say. It seems to me that art is where Frida allowed herself to be emotionally intense in order for her to appear more normal, as normal as Frida can be, in her day-to-day life. In her letter to Dr. Eloesser, she writes, quote, "Who knows what the devil is going on inside me, for it's very strange, don't you think? I had such hope to have a little Dieguito who would cry a lot, but now that it has happened, there's nothing to do but to put up with it. In any case, I have a cat's luck, since I don't die so easily, so that's something." And that is where we'll pick up for our next episode of Frida Kahlo.
This episode is brought to you by Cologuard. Do you know what's really scary? Not screening for colon cancer when you turn 45. The Cologuard test is non-invasive, requires no special prep or time off work, and ships right to your door. In just 3 simple steps, Cologuard takes the scare out of colon cancer screening. If you're 45 or older and at average risk, ask your healthcare provider about the Cologuard test. Cologuard is available by prescription only. Learn more or request a prescription today at Cologuard.com/screen.
Don't chew on that, Max.
Cooper loves that chew too.
Oh, now he's into Cooper's food. Wow, he is loving it. What do you feed Cooper?
Blue Buffalo Life Protection Formula. He never leaves a crumb. I love it because it's made with high-quality protein, nutrient-rich fruits and veggies, and wholesome whole grains.
Looks like we're switching to Blue.
Blue Buffalo foods are made with the superior ingredients your dog needs to thrive. Can your dog food say that? Visit feedbluefood.com to learn more.
That last quote is a very... I'm getting a better sense of Frida as a human through...
Yeah.
I mean, obviously through this entire series, but I feel like sometimes the way that she writes things, there is a... It might sound strange. There's a comedian in there.
Yeah.
I can feel it.
Yeah.
You know?
I honestly feel like to really appreciate Frida's art, and I don't think that's entirely true. People can come up with their own, takes, right? But like, I don't know. For me, I've really started to appreciate Frida's art by knowing what she's like when she's not doing art.
Sure.
Like what her personality is. She has this like wry sense of humor, this dark sense of humor. She's like, well, on the bright side, I didn't die, so that's something. Like that informs how I feel about her art. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, you talking about her little quips to Henry Ford and, you know, just sort of how she would do these things that were like, you know, to those that knew her, it's very funny. To those that didn't, it was weird and uncomfortable.
Yes.
You know? And I feel like I'm getting that sense even more. And it's there is, and maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but I almost do get this sense as well with that painting we were just talking about from the Henry Ford Hospital, where it's like there's this incredibly dark image of this woman bleeding in a hospital bed and these sort of macabre images around her. Meanwhile, Detroit puffs away in the background. There's something funny there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like a nice, pretty blue sky in the summer, and like the city's in the background.
Right.
It's like, it's not meant to make you laugh. It's more meant to make you go, huh.
Right.
Like, you've ever had like a terrible day where just everything's gone wrong, and you're past being upset, and you're kind of just like, huh, all right. Like, that's how I feel sometimes with sort of her paintings.
Well, and I would even say, personally, it's even a little bit beyond that, where it's like, you know, a lot of comedians, the first example that comes to mind is George Carlin, who half of his material was criticizing how terrible the world was around him.
Yeah.
But it was through that, I mean, yes, there were many times that you'd be cracking up at George Carlin's jokes, but a lot of times you'd hear what he was saying and you were going, yeah, damn, dude. Yeah. Geez. Like, you're sort of laughing at, like, you're right. That's insane.
It's also, not to put my own spin on it, but it is also a very Jewish sense of humor, right?
Well, hey, we're talking about, that's the bedrock of comedy right there. Let's be honest with ourselves.
Because, like, I think about, like, I can't remember with it, Elie Wiesel, but there was a story about Holocaust survivors in the camps getting soup every night, and they would make this absolutely terrible soup that had like no vegetables in it, and they'd always make sure to scoop from the bottom in order to get some sort of semblance of food in their bowl, right? And all of these dudes were like laughing in this scenario where they're not having enough food because they're like, dude, when we get home to our wives, they're gonna think we're crazy for yelling at them to scoop from the bottom of the bowl. Like, scoop from the bottom, you know?
Yeah.
And Frida kind of had that humor, you know?
Totally. I mean, I'm not the first to say it, but it's like, from trauma comes comedy. It's like, there's a coping mechanism that a lot of people have to do, where it's like the happiest happy people in the world are generally not very funny, because there's just, you know, Mark Twain sort of said it, there's no humor in heaven. Right? If it's all joy, that the core of comedy is the misery, right? And that's what we're doing, is we're commiserating together. And there is a sense, not overwhelmingly so, but there is a sense in Frida that I get that's like, oh, I think you're like, there is something in you that is constantly trying to find a joke, right? And it's almost like it feels like she's almost playing a trick sometimes, of her going like, let me show you how serious I'm being right now. Wink. You know what I mean? Like, that I'm starting to get that as a clearer sort of picture, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you tie back to her as a child, all of these quote unquote pranks that they were playing, it's like, clearly she has a sense of glee and joy. Her making fun of her sister and calling her like fat and ugly or whatever. It's like, there is something funny
that was made with love, you know? Like, there's like a certain, you know, like,
it's interesting.
That's the only person who visited her at the hospital, and she calls her fat and ugly. You know, like, there's like a funniness to that, right?
Right. It's like, I can't remember what the exact joke was, but I saw this interview recently with Zach Galifianakis, if you know who he is. He was in like The Hangover and stuff.
Yeah.
And there was a point where he's like telling this story about how, I guess, during filming of The Hangover, he and Bradley Cooper had become good friends, and afterwards Bradley Cooper broke up with his girlfriend, whoever it was. And I guess that Bradley Cooper, it was right around after Bradley Cooper made this movie called Focus, and you know, Bradley Cooper comes over to Zach Galifianakis and saying, oh, we broke up and all this kind of stuff, and Zach Galifianakis kind of goes, did it happen by any chance after she saw Focus? and Zach Galifianakis was like, that's my way of saying I love you and I care about you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I get that same sense of like fat and ugly about the sister. Anyway, I could be totally off base about this, but this is just the impression.
I think you are hitting the bullseye immediately, hitting the bullseye with Frida as a person.
Yeah, which makes me appreciate her more too, and it also makes me sort of laugh about. And it's not to say that she can't make serious art, because obviously she does, but it sort of like knowing this type of stuff. And then hearing about how not that long ago her one of her paintings sold for a record amount at a Sotheby's auction. Yes. And I just wonder, for whoever bought it, them sitting there staring at this painting being like, the most serious artist woman. Oh boy, she just was so blah, 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 blah. And it's like, and I think the
Frida would be laughing, being like, you guys are all dumbasses.
Yeah, I get that sense that she would be going, this is so stupid. I can't believe you guys are doing this.
She would see the irony in it too, because she's like, I'm so tired of these little hoity-toity little white boys with the little coctelitos, like musing over paintings as if it's a funeral.
Right.
And for one of hers to get sold for several $1 million, I think she would be laughing for sure.
That's awesome. Well, it's funny. You said it from the very beginning of the series. We were like, you were struggling with Frida or whatever. One, I think you and I have been laughing a lot more than we both thought we'd be laughing at this series. And I also think it's really fascinating that we've kind of come to this idea of like, I think Frida was one of those people that was like, you're either in on the joke or you're not. And it depends on who you are and how you want to see things. Mm-hmm. You know, I never would have expected that to kind of be the case.
Yeah.
You know? So for me, this has been, like I told you, I knew nothing.
Yeah, everybody ascribed a level of self-importance to her, but she was not self-important.
Yeah.
Like people were like, totally she's my muse. She's the most amazing. She's like, okay.
I'd be curious for you to have the conversation now, and maybe you already have, with Gavi, and what her feeling towards Frida was, always has been, because I know she's had this very sort of deep love of Frida and connection with Frida. I would just be curious if you had a conversation with her, what her kind of thoughts are now, if she was starting to get to this point of being like, oh, whoa, there is a weird like sense of fun and silliness. That
was something she was always trying to pitch to me when I started, and I just couldn't see it.
Oh, so she did kind of already know that.
Yeah, she was feral. She was just like one of the wolves. Like she was just more of a coyote, I should say. Just like kind of like, I don't know, like had a very vibrant life, laughed hard, fought hard, laughed at the people who took themselves seriously. Kind of took herself seriously, but in a private, artistic way. Yeah, she's like, I don't know, and I didn't see it until recently. But I would love to. Maybe I'll convince her for office hours to come in for a little bit and talk about the series. That'd be fun.
Sure. Yeah, if she's able to, we'd have to get her a microphone.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Unless you guys shared one, but that'd be kind of tough. I don't know. But no, this is for me, it's been fascinating, and I'm sure it's been fascinating for all of our listeners as well. And I think what's going to be cool, too, is we mentioned at the beginning of the episode here that we're going to be getting into the video stuff very, very soon. And there is a part of me that goes, man, we should have started it at the beginning of this series, because it would have given us the opportunity to throw up paintings on the videos.
True.
Like in kind of real time. And that'll still be the case moving forward. We'll be able to show things. Even in the series that I'm working on right now, I'm like, as I'm writing it through, I'm like, oh, that'll be a good point where I could throw up like a map of this, just so you get a better sense of what are we actually dealing with. Like I can describe it to you all day.
Maybe for this episode, we'll put Henry Ford Hospital as the episode header. That way people can see it, because it's the one we most discussed. It is like also, like you said, a hard to look at painting. So I'm kind of debating whether or not that should be the header for this one, but it would be helpful.
I'm gonna probably quickly veto that one. We can have it as a discussion, but this is one of those that's like, man,
you got to be like sitting down.
Yeah, I don't want to get like flagged, right? Of like, guys, you can't be doing this. This is a woman bleeding in bed. This is not exactly a nice thing to be seeing as a thumbnail randomly. So, yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I'm not opposed. I would be more into the idea of using her 1930 self-portrait.
Yeah, we can do that. That works too.
Thing. Or, because we did a picture for the last one, a painting for the last one too, we could even just do an actual picture of her. I'm seeing one of her right now in like laying in bed painting, which is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Might be a good one to use. I don't know. But anyway, we'll figure it out. But anyway, hope y'all are enjoying the series as much as I am. I've said it many times, Akiva, you have too. One of my favorite things about the show is getting forced into these characters. Not forced is the wrong word, but it's also the right word. Where, in most other scenarios, I probably wouldn't be like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go learn all about the life of Frida, who previous to this, I probably wasn't super interested in. But it's built an interest for me through discovery, And I think it has for you too, honestly.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Even more than I think you were expecting, because I know you were really struggling at the very beginning of writing out this whole series and researching, because you were like, I just don't know, man. She's kind of a bummer and it's sad and all this kind of stuff.
I remember the first episode took me about as much time to finish as like 3 episodes of a character that I was already stoked about, I could have made 3 Da Vinci episodes in one Frida episode when I first started, and now like the centrifugal force of it all has like been great, because now like you said, I've learned an appreciation. So
I can feel it. Well, awesome job as always, man. Do we have a sense of how many episodes? I think you had said initially it was like maybe 5, maybe 6. Do you know?
It's going to be 6 for sure.
Okay.
It's going to be one of those ones where it's like too long for 6, too short for 7, but I'm almost positive we're going to do 6.
Cool. Yeah, I would say if you can, I think 6 would be a good amount of episodes for her.
Yeah.
But hey, do the story justice as you see fit, kind of a thing. Gives me extra time anyway, so yay. All right. Well, thanks everybody again for listening. Again, before we go, if you like the show and you want to give us some support, you can do so by going to our Patreon page, patreon.com/thebiographers. For any questions, comments, or corrections, you can send us a quick email at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com, or if you just want to say hi. Every once in a while, we get a nice, lovely little email from somebody just sort of saying, hey, I liked this, and here's a suggestion for a series, and blah, 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 and it's just great to connect with y'all, so feel free to do so if you want. You can also find us on social media. That's one of the things I've been forgetting to shout out for a while now. But, we're trying to make more moves in that direction. Normal 9-to-5 life for Akiva and I is busy. So when we have time, we do what we can. But, we're around. We're on places like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, and you can follow us there. And then last thing that I'll say is reviews. Again, if y'all are enjoying the show and you want to give us a nice, kind review somewhere, we'd appreciate that. Most preferably, I would say that's going to be around Spotify and iTunes. But if there's somewhere else where you get your podcasts, that's going to be groovy too. And then as always, Akiva, what do we got going on in the world of metal?
So if you are looking to take a class and you're in Colorado, or you're going to be in Colorado, please check out Hardy and Fuller here in Denver. Classes have been going really well. We're adding more and more pretty much every week. Trying to stay ahead of that has been a whole thing. And I would love to hear from y'all. I've had a couple of, students become listeners. I would love a couple of listeners to become students. So check out Hardy and Fuller if you want to learn how to make your own knives. If you want to buy a knife from me, I have all sorts of new knives on the website. I'm calling these ones my teacher's pet knives. I've made over the course of the last year, I've taught so many classes, and every time I do, I make a demonstration piece. And recently I've been collecting them. I took them all apart, refinished them, got the tempers just right. They're all on the website, and they're a little bit lower on the price point because I had made those using, the fundamental skills of blacksmithing, as opposed to some of the fancier stuff that you'll see me sell to chefs and collectors, that sort of thing. So check out metalworkbymiola.com if you want to grab one of those. Use the code biographers at checkout for 10% off, and hope to see you guys there.
Yeah, and I was actually just checking out your website the other day, too. There's some really, really cool stuff on there. Even if y'all are new to the world of custom handmade knives, there's what are called Viking knives on there, which are super cool. You just have to see it to know what we're talking about when we say a Viking knife, but they're really neat-looking pieces. Right? And that was one of the projects we did a number of years back, is I made 3 of them specifically to give them as gifts for my brother-in-law, and my father. So super, super cool. Yeah, again, everybody go check out his website, Metalwork by Miola. His last name is Meola. In case you get lost somewhere, use the code biographers at checkout to get 10% off your order, which Akiva's knives, that actually does go a pretty long ways towards a nice little handy discount for you. So go use it. Be cool.
Yeah, thanks, man.
All right, everybody. Well, we will let you go. Thanks again for listening, and do remember, like always, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge, and I do hope you all learned something today.
See ya!
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.